Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction and for introducing us to the International Art Museum of America. And I'm really grateful for your invitation. And it's fantastic to be here with everybody today. So today I wanted to share some of my artwork and really dive into the creative process, how I go from ideas to making art, and sort of an experimental process. Also want to speak about the healing power of creativity. So let's just jump right in. So I began my career as a photographer very early in life. I was about 4 years old here. That's me with the infamous Fisher-Price camera. And I love this photograph not only because I'm holding a camera, which is kind of fun, but I love the look in my eye and the playfulness, that childhood curiosity and playfulness really comes through. So I keep that on my desktop just to remind myself to not get so uptight or take myself too seriously. I started using a real camera when I was about 12 years old. My parents used to send us off to summer school, and they would allow us to switch between an academic class one summer, and then the next summer we could take something for fun. So when I was about 12, I took a photography class, which was just amazing. We learned how to use a camera, but what I was really inspired by was the darkroom and using the darkroom. So this is a picture that may be my first photo ever, but it's definitely from the very first roll of film I ever shot. And the instructor cut it and put it on a map board for me, and I've just treasured it ever since. One of the things that I really love about this photo is that it sort of foreshadows my interest in architectural photography. Some of you here know me and know that I do a lot of architectural food and product photography, and this image really shows my intuitive sense for that. So one of the things that I often speak to my students about is tapping into your intuition and following up on some of your curiosities that you've had throughout your life. I had a good friend who shared my passion for photography, so we built a dark room in his basement using an enlarger that his uncle had given him and covering the little windows with garbage bags. It was pretty makeshift, but we learned by reading books and a lot of trial and error, mostly error. This is called a solarization, and if you turn the lights on partway through the exposure, you get this partial reversal of tones, which we discovered when his little sister turned the lights on to come down to the basement. So now you can actually use Photoshop to create solarized looks. But this was pure accident that we embraced. So I went off to college as a pre-med student, but really just couldn't stand it. Kept saying, I wish I was out shooting, I wish I was out shooting. So I applied and was accepted to go to Florence, Italy, to study history of art, history of architecture, history of science, and cappuccino, which I still practice to this day. So we got to do really cool things like go to the Uffizi or go to the different museums and galleries and learn about single point perspective and sketch single point perspective and analyze it. So part of our homework was to keep a journal. So these are just some notes from my journal back when I was a junior in college, so just a couple years ago. As part of my senior project or my final project, I decided I wanted to do a series of photographs that explored architecture and light and the interplay between the two. So I intentionally left out parts of the architecture where the light would actually define the space or define the architecture. So these were all done while I was there in Florence using a 35 millimeter camera and black and white film that I had processed at like a 1 hour lab across the street from the Duomo. So again, just fascinated by the interaction between light and shadow, and also the way the grays of the architecture created a grayscale from white to black. If you look throughout the image, you'll see all the tones from almost a pure white to almost a pure black. And I was really fascinated by that. When I got back to college, which was at Hobart up in Geneva, New York, upstate New York, it was very cold and gray, and I was still interested in form and color and texture and light and shadow, but I wanted to introduce color. I went to a junkyard and found these old discarded warehouse lights. They fit into my budget perfectly. They were free. And I bought some solar blankets and had some mirrors cut into geometric shapes. And then I would take like a colored gel and stick it on a desk lamp and shine that in to get some color. And I would hang up different colored t-shirts or fabrics around my room to reflect back and basically paint these objects with silver. I was very inspired by the formalist or the modernist photographers who were very interested in shape, form, texture, light, shadow, composition, those ideas. I was particularly inspired by Alfred Stieglitz and his photographs of clouds that he called equivalents. For him, those equivalents, those cloud photos with no signs of buildings or people, were really equivalent to human emotions. And I was really drawn to that idea. So that's what these images for me had a similar concept, and I titled this series Innerscapes. This image is very important to me. It's one of the first images I made where I really felt in the creative zone. I was listening to an album by the band or the group Tangerine Dream. It's this ambient music. And my room was just sort of bathed in this blue light that you see reflected in the silver. And there's sort of a combination of the music and the color of the light and the reflections just put me in this purely creative state. And any of you out there that are artists have probably experienced this, where you're in the zone. Wasn't really thinking about the composition or anything. It was just, everything was really happening without much thought. It was just coming through me. And it's amazing because when I listen to that album, it's still one of my favorites, and I play it in the studio all the time because it does have the ability to kind of trigger that creativity. So after college, I went off to Chicago, in order to make a living as a photographer, I wanted to do architectural, food, and product photography. So I went out there and got to do some amazing work with Architectural Digest, Hyatt Hotels, Rubbermaid, Miller Beer, Oscar Mayer, lots of big national, international brands, and learned a ton. But I really missed the discussions about creativity and art and philosophy that we had in college. So I decided to go back to graduate school. And one of our first meetings, my mentor, Ellen Carey, asked us, when was that moment when you first fell in love with photography? And I immediately became that 12-year-old boy sitting in the dark room under the amber glow of the safe light and the running water, and just watching my first print emerge in the developer. And that was just a magical moment for me. And it's still a very vivid memory. So I decided to stick all of my photo gear in a closet and work with a very, very simple photographic technique called the photogram. A photogram is when you take a piece of photosensitized paper or film, put some objects on it, and expose it to light. Anything that gets exposed will turn either black or, in this case, blue, and anything that's protected will stay white. So this is a sun print, and some of you may have seen this. They have it in museum gift shops a lot of times, or you may have seen it in other places, but it's essentially blueprint paper. And what was great about it was it's relatively inexpensive. You use it with sunlight and water. So I would take it outside, put some objects on it, expose it to sunlight. It starts to turn blue. When it gets to a certain color blue, you put it in a tray of water, and that water develops it and makes the image permanent. So it was great because it was cheap. It didn't require a darkroom. It didn't require much of anything. And I could quickly go through ideas. Where in the commercial world, you might spend a full day setting up a shot, and then the full day, the next day, actually taking the picture, right? So very, very different. It was very expensive, very time consuming. This was the opposite, and it really allowed for quick iterations of ideas. And so I started going through these, and I was really drawn to the ones that looked like maybe they were outer space, taken through a telescope, or maybe they were subatomic particles. And so that reminded me again of my childhood and my G.I. Joe astronaut. And when I was very little, I had this G.I. Joe astronaut, and I would put him in the space capsule, and it came with a 45 recording of the first orbital space flight. And so I would put him on, put the record on my little record player, and just imagine flying around in space, and wondered what it would be like to look out that window and just be out there in outer space. And I had completely forgotten about that, but these photograms, these blue photograms, brought me back to that moment here. So I bought a bunch of darkroom paper and collected some objects and went into the darkroom to see what I could create. My goal was to try to explore the feeling of being in space or being within subatomic particles. And so these are photograms, same process, except I'm in a darkroom. So this is a 20 by 24 inch sheet of photo paper with some objects on it. I expose it to light. The areas that get exposed to light turn black. And this was an amazing paper that was black and silver. So any areas that were protected from the light stayed silver, which referenced that spacesuit and the rocket ships, and the whole space age was full of silver material. So I liked the reference back to that. So these are 20 by 24 inch images that we're looking at here, done on that silver paper in the darkroom. I liked those images, but I wanted to create a little bit more mystery and movement. So I brought some flashlights into the darkroom, some like little reading lights, and would expose with the flashlight and move the flashlight during the exposure, which created this sense of movement and more mystery. It also made every image when I watched it come up in the developer would be brand new for me. I had no idea. I had an idea, but the details were always a surprise, and that was really exciting. These are on 11 by 14-inch photo paper. And you can see it's more ethereal on the top in particular. It looks more like a nebula maybe. This is 20 by 24 inches. So remember that image of the car where I told you about the solarization process. So while this image was in the developer, I flipped the lights on, flipped them back off. And so you get this very kind of smoky, ethereal quality to it that was really a lot of happy art accident. I could not really control this. So just keeping doing more and more, and then picking the ones that really resonated the most. This is done on a kind of a watercolor paper, like a rough watercolor paper material. So the black is really beautiful and rich. And another solarized image. This one just kind of emerges. The longer you look at it, the more it starts to reveal itself. Some of the others are more obvious. So I like that play between seeing something immediately or having to explore a little bit more before you really start to understand the image. So I was teaching myself astronomy. I learned all the constellations in the northern hemisphere and used to go out with my telescope and binoculars. I started studying, I learned what E equals mc squared means and understood what relativity means in quantum physics. And so again, all of these ideas, string theory, hyperspace, all of these ideas about the shape of space-time were in my mind as I was working in the darkroom. So I'm not a great mathematician, so my way of exploring those concepts, which are probably almost impossible for the human mind to grasp, my way of exploring them was in the darkroom. So I was exploring relativity while making these images, quantum physics, string theory. A few years ago, I got an email from an art director who designs all of the magazines for the Four Seasons Hotel, the actual Four Seasons Hotel. And they were putting together an article called Aha. And they had interviewed a number of famous people about the aha moment that changed the trajectory of their careers. And he had a quote by the physicist Brian Greene. If you've ever watched Big Bang Theory, you may have seen Brian Greene on that show, but he's also a science writer and does some like Discovery Channel type or PBS movies about space-time and relativity and things like that. So he had a quote from Brian Greene where Brian Greene explored that moment where he first really truly understood the power of what E equals mc squared means and how those laws govern everything from keeping our coffee in the cup and keeping the universe and the galaxies together. So it's a profound moment for him. And so here's my image with Brian Greene's quote in the foreground. So I love that, my image is with this quote and that it went to every Four Seasons hotel room around the globe. What I think is especially amazing is this art director had no idea that I studied relativity. He just found this image and thought it went well with the quote about relativity. And he had no idea that I was reading a book by Brian Greene when I made this picture. So I speak a lot, and I have a few of my students here. I always I often talk about awareness and intention, and what is your intention? And this to me is an amazing illustration of when your intention is clear, other people will perceive it in your work without having to read anything about it. It just kind of comes out somehow. Um, so that's one of my little stories about awareness and intention, and your intention manifesting itself in an interesting way. Um, I also went on to create some images using the same technique, but then photo etching them and using the zinc plates. That's what you're looking at here. These are zinc plates that have images engraved or etched in them using a traditional photo etching process, but um, not printing them on paper, just keeping the plate as an art object. I exhibited these with beakers to reference alchemy and science. And I would etch these for hours at a time. So the acid would actually, you can see here, actually, if I show you the back, this is on copper. You can see the acid has actually etched its way through the metal. And we got that nice patina on it. So I really was embracing the process as part of the work. I was giving up my control and collaborating with the chemistry to create some of these images. After graduate school, so this series was called Ions in the Ether, and this is all part of my graduate thesis show. After graduate school, I was teaching at some of the universities and colleges, and as part of my gig, we were able to take classes. So I thought, oh, maybe I should learn Photoshop. This is in 1998, maybe. So we were on version 2. I think we're on version 20 now. So it gives you an idea of how long it's been. But we were given the assignment to combine 2 unrelated images. And I had this Polaroid SX70 that I had taken of the gas burners of my stove in my first apartment. And it was a long exposure, so the camera moved during the exposure. And that created this lovely blue light blurred image. And I had this very powerful image of my grandfather. My grandfather died when I was in 5th grade, and I just always loved this image. I really felt his presence in it. So I decided to combine the 2 and came up with this. And this image always has spoken to me. It's on my desk. For me, this image really speaks to the healing power of creativity. I feel like he's watching over me. I feel his spirit. My mother, my grandmother, my aunt, all 3 of them really felt the same way. So I made prints for them that they kept in their homes. So again, it's just a combination of images and the power of, for me, the power of creativity to heal. Well, it's a good thing I had all this healing and creativity. Not long after I made that image, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I started an online journal. I think they call that a blog these days, but that was 2001, before people started blogging, really. And it was just a way for me to keep my friends and family in touch with what was going on without having to repeat my story throughout the day. So I wrote in a journal and I published it online. But I also embraced a lot of different modalities. I was introduced to meditation, which became a very important part of my life. And hopefully you'll be able to join us on Friday. We'll be doing a guided imagery meditation experience here using some artwork and music, and I'll be guiding you along. But I started meditating, and I engaged my artwork, my music, nutrition, exercise, acupuncture, everything I could in addition to the 6 rounds of chemotherapy that I went through. This is an excerpt from my journal at that time, and it's pretty amazing to me. I was diagnosed on March 12th of 2001. 16 days later, I had this knowing or this realization that I am a creative person, an artist, creating my life. I welcome this cancer as a collaborator in my creative process and will contribute everything I am. The cancer will do its best as well. I have no expectations of what my life will be like after this. I have no idea. I have no desire to return to my life before cancer. Instead, I relish the opportunities in front of me. Let the process unfold moment by moment. I think working in the dark room, working as an artist, we're always on the edge of uncertainty. And we have to take the step off that ledge on a regular basis if we're gonna truly be creative and make something new and not just repeat ourselves. And being in that mode so often, I think really, well, I don't think, but I know really helped me go from being very scared of dying to embracing my cancer as a collaborator in the creative process of creating a life. I had read Suzuki's book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which I highly recommend, and used the quote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few." So just embracing the idea of being a beginner where everything is new and there are lots of possibilities. So after going through chemo, it became very difficult for me to be cold. So I moved from Connecticut down to Florida, and some time passed by, and I decided it was time to create some new work and have a show. So I went and visited my friend Barry, who I see right there in his studio painting while we're talking. Hey, Barry. Barry owned a gallery at the time. And I said, "Hey, Barry, what do you think about me having a show at your gallery?" And he said, "You? Yeah, absolutely." So I said, "Awesome, cool, this is amazing." And then I went home and said, "Oh my God, what am I going to show?" I didn't have any work really ready for a show. I had work, but I wanted to show something new. So at one point I went back to the gallery. It was a nice intimate gallery with a bench in the center of it. And I thought, this gallery is kind of like a meditation room. So I wanted to create some images that were meditative in nature and maybe based on meditations. I had started studying Kabbalah, or Jewish mysticism, and had become fascinated with the idea of how the world began. Where did we come from? What does it all mean? You know, just some of the little questions from a more mystical or spiritual perspective. I had explored some of those ideas from quantum physics and a scientific perspective. Now I was shifting to more of a spiritual, mystical perspective. And there's the idea about the first light. You know, God said, "Let there be light," and there was. Well, the Kabbalists would say the light was so bright, that first light was so bright it shined all the way from one end of the universe to the other. But it was so bright, it concealed everything. So in order to reveal creation, God had to conceal some of the light. So I was fascinated by the idea of how light would be concealed in order to reveal all things. And so I started exploring that idea. I have a multifaceted object in my studio that I photograph and move the camera during the exposure to create this sense of movement and overlapping and these shapes that are either emerging or dissolving, or maybe both. And again, this is a very experimental approach, I have to take a lot of photographs to get images that really work. Um, so these images were called, or still are called, Seeking the Light. And there were meditations on the first light. As I was making these, this blue light appeared, which I just found very peaceful, and it reminded me of that image I showed you back towards the beginning, where I said I was listening to Tangerine Dream, and this blue light was in my room. Well, here this blue light starts coming back. There's the image of my grandfather with the blue light of my gas burner on my stove. So these are images from Seeking the Light. This is what the exhibition looked like. To give you a sense of scale, the larger pieces on the side are 20 by 30 inches. The pieces in the middle are 12 by 18. There's another set from the other side. And this is what people saw when they first walked in. Now this piece in the center is 40 by 60 inches. So it's a rather large photograph and very immersive. So about a year after my show at Lighthouse Gallery, guess who got cancer again? Me, yay. So in 2014, I discovered a lump under my tongue, which turned out to be oral cancer. And I had a biopsy, turned out to be cancer, so I went up to Jacksonville, Florida. I was referred to an amazing, brilliant surgeon who removed part of my tongue and the lymph nodes in the left side of my neck. We believed it was a stage 1 or stage 2 cancer at the time, and that the surgery would take care of everything. It was still pretty scary having part of my tongue removed. I didn't know if I'd be able to speak again, but here I am, speaking with all of you. So we had the surgery. Things went well. He had to remove more than he thought, but still everything is pretty good. We thought we'd be done, but then the biopsy results came back, and it turns out that the cancer had spread into my lymph nodes. So my diagnosis got upgraded from a stage 1 or stage 2 to a stage 4. So stage 4 oral cancer protocol means that I had to do a 6-week regimen of radiation to my tongue, mouth, and throat. It was 5 days a week for a total of 30 doses. Now, in order to get this radiation, they needed to do a high-res CAT scan, and that's what we're looking at here. So that's actually me. And this is the radiation program they created, which simulates where the radiation will build up most intensely. So they have a machine that spins around 360 degrees, and it targets different areas while sparing the optic nerve, saliva glands, carotid arteries, things like that, some of the important things. But in order to do this, you have to be in the exact same position every single treatment, so 30 treatments. The way that they help you stay in position is they start by sticking a wedge in my mouth, and then they took a mesh plastic, a thin mesh plastic, and stretched it over my head, pressed it into my eyes, wrapped around my neck and shoulders, and then bolted me to the table. So yeah, it's if you're getting anxiety, yes. I wound up having a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't even breathe without gagging. So I took an anti-anxiety pill, and it got me through the test. And I went home and I decided, this treatment, they said the first week or so is kind of a free ride. After that, you won't be able to eat, you won't be able to drink, you won't be able to drive or work. You'll be in intense pain, but we'll help you manage that. So I decided, I was living in Miami for this treatment. I decided that I didn't want to be sedated before I even got started. So I went home and Googled how not to gag at the dentist. I played slide guitar, so I got in bed with a guitar slide, stuck it in my mouth, set my iPhone timer to 10 minutes, and tried some of the things I read about, none of which worked. I just kept gagging. But I kept trying, I kept trying, and I kept trying. Eventually, this image appeared in my mind's eye. And once this image appeared in my mind's eye, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of relaxation. I felt like I was immersed in a safe space. And I could actually lie there as long as I wanted to. I even wanted to lie there. So I started practicing meditating, letting this image also appeared, and just gently letting those images float in my mind's eye while I lied there with a guitar slide in my mouth. I went down to Miami. I had some prints made of this. I had some pictures of my family. I sat in the waiting area and just kind of meditated on these images. When they called me in, and I was meditating on light, energy, and all of this healing light and the blue light. I was just integrating all of that. Radiation is high energy light. So I was really trying to embrace it the best that I could. So when they brought me out of the waiting room into the treatment room, I saw this. And I was just blown away by this blue light in the ceiling. It was that blue light that I had been meditating on. And again, talk about manifesting your intentions. There it is. The machine it even has blue on it. So I saw this. It reminded me of a James Turrell installation, and I immediately knew that I could do this. So there's the treatment room. Those are the masks hanging up on the racks there. It's my technician grabbing my mask. So I got through all of the treatments. I even made some artwork. This is part of a video that I made starting. So I was waiting for my oncologist, and I don't know if any of you have been through oncology, but turn that volume down. Oncologists tend to be very late, so I was sitting waiting for him to show up, and I noticed this pattern of light and shadow on the wall. So I pulled out a little point and shoot camera I had and captured some video. And then when I got back home, I added the texture and shifted the color blue, of course, and added some music to it to create a video. And this is great if you ever need to relax. Put this on for a few minutes and it will calm you down. So this is called The Four Worlds. It's on my website if you want to visit Healing Power of Creativity and go to the videos page. You'll see this up there and you can enjoy that. So the local newspaper did an article about me and my exhibit at Lighthouse, my artwork, and some of my journey. And I sent it to some friends, and one of my friends in Connecticut saw it and invited me to do another show up in Connecticut and Hartford. And so, again, I said, yeah, absolutely. Oh crap, what am I gonna show? So I went back and just started photographing things and exploring with the camera, trying to come up with some interesting images. I made this image just of an ordinary thing I have in the house and thought it looked really cool. It really reminded me of a Hubble Space Telescope photo, which I love, but it didn't go anywhere new. It just kind of looked like a Hubble Space Telescope image. So I explored, I tried cropping it as a square or as a circle, and combining it with different images, and nothing really jumped out, but I kept at it. At some point, I was out and about and I found another object that I thought would look really cool combined. So I bought it, brought it home to the studio, started photographing it, and then combined it to make this. So this is the beginning of A Glimpse of Infinity. And these are some of those images. Now these have been printed as 20 by 30. They're printed on brushed aluminum. And for me, these images really embody one of the things that I wanted to do. I had a show, or a lot of work that was inspired by physics and quantum physics, science, relativity, all of those things. And I had done some work that was inspired by my spirituality, by Kabbalah. And I wanted to try to bring those two together. I felt like I had like 2-3 different worlds going on, and I wanted to really try to integrate them. So for me, these images are really about integrating a spiritual and a scientific. As I mentioned, I study Kabbalah and do some Jewish meditation. This is a Jewish prayer. It's the oldest and probably the most well-known, maybe the most important Jewish prayer. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Anybody who's Jewish knows this. It's the first prayer you learn. You're just supposed to say it when you wake up, when you go to sleep, and it should be the last thing you say as you die. As a literal translation, it's really a unification or a statement of monotheism, right? Adonai, our God, is one, right? We don't worship idols, we worship one God. But if you interpret it from a Kabbalistic or a more spiritual perspective, it's very rich and profound. So Shema Yisrael, Shema means hear or listen. The Kabbalists use that one word as a meditation even. So if you say, Ma, Ma, you can bring yourself from white noise to a single tone and begin to quiet your mind. So listening to the still, quiet voice right in that first word. Israel may be thought of as the people of Israel or the nation, but in the Torah, when Jacob wrestles with the angels and wrestles with the divine, his name is changed from Jacob to Israel. So the Kabbalists see the word Israel as referring to that part of yourself that seeks to cling to the divine, or seeks to know the divine, that wrestles with the angels, that wrestles with spirituality. So just in the first words, you're telling yourself to quiet and hear that still small voice within you that seeks to connect to the divine. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai is our God. Adonai is one of the Hebrew words for God, and there are many Hebrew words for God. Adonai is the unknowable, infinite God, beyond all category, beyond all limit, beyond time and space. Eloheinu means our God. So these two words are basically saying that we can have a personal relationship with the infinite. defies logic, but here it is. That's what mysticism does. So Adonai our God, or we can have a personal relationship with the infinite. Then we have Adonai Echad. So Adonai, again, the infinite, unknowable God, beyond all limits, beyond time and space, is one. So this can be interpreted as meaning everything that we see, that we name in our lives, us, the rock, everything is one. And if you meditate on this, as I was and still do, you can start to see that unification. And it's really an amazing experience when you get that glimpse of that. As I started making this work, that prayer really resonated with this work for me. And I've had many people tell me that this work resonates in that way for them as well. So again, it is that intention coming through. So these are some images from my series, A Glimpse of Infinity. These are all done. They're all relatively straight photographs, manipulated in Photoshop to combine them, to add some shading and some color. But if I showed you the things, you would go, oh, okay. It's not like computer graphics. It's really pretty much straight photographs. So this is just a series of them. And one of the things I like is working with a series like this is that repetition becomes a form of change. So they're very similar, but as you explore them in more depth, you start to notice these subtle nuances. So this is a show I had in Vero Beach at Raw Space. The curator decided to hang them up like this, which I loved, really immersed you in them. They're printed on a brushed aluminum, so they have a very reflective quality. The areas in the images that would be white are actually silver, and so they really shift with the light throughout the day and will shift in quality as you move throughout the room. So that's me to give you a sense of scale. And just to kind of wrap this up on a note about the healing power of photography, some of you know me and know that my father is in hospice care right now, and he asked for one of these images for his room so that he could look at it, because he just feels this positive healing energy coming off the image, and it lights up his days. So I think I would just end on that. So thank you all very much. I appreciate you being here and paying attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Please visit my website for healingpowerofcreativity.com. My music, my ambient music, is also on Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube, anywhere that you get music, or you can contact me. I'd be happy to make some CDs for you.